I still remember the exact moment my world cracked in half. It was Christmas Eve, and the dining room glowed with soft golden lights. My mother's famous cinnamon rolls filled the house with a smell that usually made me feel safe. My younger brother, Ethan, laughed too loudly at one of Dad's old stories while my aunt poured everyone another glass of wine. To anyone looking through the window, we were the perfect American family. We weren't. I'm Claire, 33 years old, divorced, and the proud owner of a downtown condo I'd spent nearly 10 years paying for. Every overtime shift, every vacation I skipped, every sacrifice I made had gone into that little place. It wasn't just worth $350,000. It was proof that I could survive on my own. After my divorce, everyone expected me to move back in with my parents or ask for help. I didn't. I rebuilt my life from scratch, working 60-hour weeks until I could finally hold those keys in my hand. That condo became my safe place. So when my mother raised her wine glass and smiled across the table, I had no idea she was about to destroy everything. "Claire," she said sweetly, "this Christmas is going to be one you'll never forget." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I wish I hadn't. Dinner continued like nothing was wrong. Dad kept asking about work. Ethan couldn't stop talking about his latest business idea that had already failed twice. His wife nodded along, pretending everything was fine, even though they were drowning in debt. I'd helped them before. $5,000 here, $2,000 there. I never expected the money back. Family helps family. At least that's what I'd always believed. Halfway through dessert, my aunt suddenly smiled and asked, "So, when are Ethan and Melissa moving into your condo?" My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry, what?" The room went silent for just a second. Then everyone started exchanging nervous looks. Mom cleared her throat. "Oh, wish thought your father already told you." "Told me what?" Dad wouldn't even look me in the eyes. Instead, Ethan leaned back in his chair with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. "It's honestly the best Christmas gift anyone's ever given us." I felt my stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" Mom reached into her purse and calmly pulled out a folder. She slid it across the table as if she were handing me a Christmas card. "We've already worked everything out," she said. I opened it. Inside were printed photos of my condo, floor plans, moving schedules, even furniture layouts with Ethan's name written across the top. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. "What is this?" Dad finally spoke. "We promised Ethan your condo." The words didn't register. "You what?" "He needs it more than you do," Mom said softly, almost like she was explaining something obvious. "You're single. You can rent somewhere else for a while." I stared at every face around that table. Not one of them looked surprised. Not one. That's when I realized this wasn't a joke. They had all known, every single one of them, and I was the last person to find out. I slowly looked back down at the folder, my hands beginning to shake. Then Ethan smiled and said the sentence that changed everything. "Don't worry," he laughed. "You'll understand once you sign the papers." At that moment, something inside me quietly broke, but none of them had the slightest idea what was about to happen next. For a few long seconds, I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heartbeat. The room blurred around me. Christmas music still played softly in the background, and somehow that made everything feel even more surreal. My family was passing mashed potatoes, sipping wine, smiling and talking about my home like it already belonged to someone else. I slowly looked up from the folder. "You've got to be kidding." Nobody laughed. Mom folded her hands together. "Claire, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I blinked at her. "Harder? You're telling me you've promised my condo to Ethan without even asking me?" Dad finally spoke, his voice calm, almost rehearsed. "We've been discussing this for months." "Months?" He nodded. "Ethan and Melissa need a fresh start. They're expecting a baby soon, and your place is closer to good schools." I turned to Ethan. "You never thought to ask me?" He shrugged. "I knew you'd overreact." I actually laughed, but it wasn't from amusement. It was the kind of laugh that comes when your heart doesn't know whether to cry or scream. Overreact? I repeated. You're trying to take my home. It's just a condo, Melissa whispered. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else that night. Just a condo? To them, it was a piece of real estate. To me, it was 10 years of double shifts. It was eating instant noodles so I could save money. It was spending birthdays alone because I couldn't afford vacations. It was rebuilding my life after my ex-husband walked away with almost everything we had. That condo wasn't given to me. I earned every square foot of it. Mom reached across the table as if she were comforting a child. Honey, you're successful. You'll buy another one. I pulled my hand away before she could touch me. No. The room went still. No, Dad asked. No, I repeated. I'm not signing anything. Ethan leaned forward. You don't really have a choice. I stared at him. What exactly does that mean? He exchanged a quick glance with Dad before answering. We've already told everyone we're moving in next month. I frowned. Everyone? Our landlord, friends, Melissa's parents. He smiled confidently. They're all expecting us to move. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, because you made promises using something that isn't yours, now I'm supposed to fix your problem? Mom sighed dramatically. Claire, stop being selfish. Selfish. That word echoed through my head. For years, I had loaned money whenever someone asked. I paid for Dad's medical bills when insurance didn't cover everything. I helped Mom replace her car. I covered Ethan's rent twice after his failed businesses. Not once had I called them selfish, but the first time I protected something that belonged to me, suddenly, I was the villain. I quietly closed the folder and stood up. I think I'm done here. Dad's voice turned sharp. Sit down. No. This is a family decision. I looked directly into his eyes. No, Dad, it's a decision about my property. He slammed his hand against the table. We're your parents. And I'm a 33-year-old woman. Nobody's spoke. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, I picked up my coat. As I reached the front door, Mom called after me. If you walk out, don't expect us to support your decision. Without turning around, I answered quiet. You stopped supporting me the moment you decided my life belonged to someone else. Then I walked out into the freezing December night. The cold air hit my face, but it couldn't numb what I was feeling. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to sit in my car for nearly 10 minutes before I could even start the engine. Instead of driving home, I drove straight to my condo. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and stood in complete silence. The living room was exactly the way I'd left it that morning. My books. My couch. The framed photo of my late grandmother on the shelf. I slowly walked from room to room, touching the walls with my fingertips. This was my home. Legally, financially, emotionally. And no one, not even my own family, was going to take it from me. I didn't know it yet, but before the next sunrise, I was about to uncover a secret that would change everything and turn my family's perfect Christmas into the biggest nightmare of their lives. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents smiling across the Christmas table while calmly discussing my future as if I wasn't even there. By 3 a.m, I gave up, made myself a cup of coffee, and spread every document related to my condo across the kitchen island. The deed, the mortgage payoff letter, property tax records, insurance papers, everything was exactly where it should be. My name was the only one on every single document. Legally, there wasn't a single thing my family could do. That should have made me feel better. Instead, something kept bothering me. Dad had looked far too confident. Ethan had acted like moving into my condo was already a done deal. They weren't bluffing. They believed they had something. I grabbed the folder they'd handed me at dinner and looked through every page again. At first, it was just printed floor plans and furniture layouts. Then I noticed a folded sheet tucked into the back. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Ethan. I unfolded it carefully. My stomach dropped. It was a letter from a local moving company, confirming a full service. Move into my condo on January 3rd. Someone had already paid the deposit. Someone had given them access instructions. Someone had even listed me as the cooperative owner. I laughed in disbelief. They had planned every detail without telling me. Then I saw another page. It was an email chain. Mom had written, "Claire won't make a scene. She always puts family first." Dad had replied, "If she hesitates, we'll pressure her at Christmas dinner. She won't embarrass us in front of everyone." Ethan's response made my blood run cold. "Worst case, we'll move in while she's at work. Once our furniture is inside, she'll never kick us out." I read that sentence 3 times. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was a plan, a calculated plan. For the first time in my life, I realized my own family wasn't asking for help. They were trying to steal from me. I immediately called the moving company. When the manager answered, I introduced myself as the legal owner of the property. There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "We were told this was a family-approved transfer." "It isn't." I emailed him proof of ownership while we were still on the phone. Within 15 minutes, he canceled the move and refunded the deposit to the person who had paid it. He apologized several times before hanging up. One problem solved, but I wasn't finished. The next morning, I drove to my condo's management office. The property manager, Denise, had known me for years. The second she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. After I explained everything, she stared at me in disbelief. "They actually planned to move people into your unit without your permission?" I nodded. She immediately updated every security note in the building. "No one gets keys. No one gets access. If anyone claims to be family, we'll call you first." Then she smiled. "And honestly, we'll probably call the police too." For the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt a small sense of relief. But it didn't last long. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. "Mun." I declined the call. A minute later, "Dad." Declined. Then Ethan. Declined. The calls kept coming. Voicemailed. Texts. Messages from relatives. Some begged me to calm down. Others accused me of tearing the family apart. Apparently, my parents had already created their own version of the story. According to them, I had ruined Christmas because I refused to help my struggling brother and his pregnant wife. Conveniently, they forgot to mention the part where they tried to give away a home they didn't own. I didn't respond to a single message. Instead, I did something they never expected. I called an attorney. After reviewing everything, she leaned back in her chair and said something I'll never forget. "Claire, your case is stronger than you think." She explained that while they hadn't successfully taken my condo, the emails clearly showed an organized attempt to pressure me into transferring valuable property. Combined with the false statements they'd made to the moving company, it painted a very ugly picture. Then she asked me a simple question. "What outcome do you want?" For a moment, I thought about revenge, about humiliating them, about making them feel exactly what they'd made me feel. But then I realized something. I didn't want their condo. I didn't want their money. I didn't even want an apology they didn't mean. I wanted my life back. Without the guilt. Without the manipulation. Without people treating my success like it belonged to them. My attorney smiled. "In that case, let's make sure they never have another opportunity." Within 48 hours, we sent formal legal notices, demanding that my family stop representing my property as theirs, stop contacting third parties about my condo, and preserve every email and text related to their plan. The letters were polite, professional, absolutely devastating. 2 days later, Denise called me. "You might want to check the lobby cameras." "What happened?" She laughed softly. "Your parents and Ethan showed up with a rental truck." I stared at my phone. "They actually came?" "Oh, yes." "They argued with security for almost 30 minutes. And they left empty-handed." I couldn't help smiling. For the first time since Christmas dinner, I realized something important. The people who had spent years controlling me had just discovered they couldn't control me anymore. They thought the story was over. They had no idea it was only beginning, because less than 24 hours later, my phone would light up with 79 missed calls, and the real reason behind their panic would finally be revealed. I thought the regal letters would finally make my family leave me alone. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next afternoon, I was sitting at my desk finishing a report when I glanced at my phone. The screen was completely covered with notifications. Mom, Dad, Ethan, Melissa, my aunt, 2 cousins, even neighbors I'd known since I was a teenager. When I finally counted them, I just stared. 79 missed calls. My first thought was that someone had died. My hands actually started shaking as I called my aunt back. She answered on the first ring. Claire, hey Bella. Where have you been? I'm working. What's going on? There was a long silence. You really don't know? Know what? She lowered her voice. The police were at your parents' house this morning. I sat up straight. What happened? Your father got into a huge argument with officers. The neighbors came outside. It was ugly. After hanging up, I called my attorney. She had already heard. Apparently, the moving company I'd contacted had reported the situation after discovering they'd been given false information about ownership of the property. The condo management had also documented my family's attempt to gain unauthorized access to the building. None of that automatically meant criminal charges. But once everything was reviewed together, the police decided to speak with everyone involved. My parents had never expected anyone to question their version of events. Now they had to explain why they'd tried to move another family into a home they didn't own. That was why my phone had exploded. Not because they missed me, because they needed me. An hour later, Dad finally left a voicemail. His confident voice was gone. Claire, please call me. We can fix this. Fix this. Those words almost made me laugh. For months, they had planned behind my back. They had counted on my silence. Now they wanted cooperation? I didn't call. Instead, I listened to the rest of the voicemails. Mom cried through hers. Sweetheart, families make mistakes. Don't let outsiders destroy us. Ethan sounded angry. If you don't stop this, you're going to ruin all of our lives. That one caught my attention. Not once did he say he was sorry. Not once did he admit he was wrong. His biggest concern was facing consequences. That told me everything. A few days later, my attorney informed me that my parents wanted to settle everything privately. They wanted me to withdraw my complaints. In return, they promised never to ask about the condo again. I smiled. They're forgetting one thing. What? They're negotiating as if they still have leverage. I agreed to meet them, but only at my attorney's office. No family dinner, no emotional speeches, no guilt, just facts. When they walked into the conference room, they looked completely different. Dad suddenly seemed 10 years older. Mom wouldn't even look me in the eyes. Ethan looked exhausted. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Mom whispered, "We're sorry." It was the first apology I'd heard, but something about it felt empty. I looked at her calmly. "What exactly are you sorry for?" She hesitated. "For everything." "No." She frowned. "What do you mean? I want you to say what you actually did." The room became painfully quiet. Dad cleared his throat. "We crossed a line. You tried to take my home." Nobody answered. "You planned it for months." Silence. "You expected me to surrender something I'd spent 10 years building." Mom started crying again. "I thought you'd understand." I shook my head. "That's the problem. You never asked whether I understood. You decided for me." Then I reached into my bag and placed a single envelope on the table. Dad looked confused. "What's this?" "My final decision." He slowly opened it. Inside was a simple letter. It explained that, effective immediately, all financial support between us was over. No more loans. No more emergency money. No more paying bills. No more being everyone's safety net. Communication would happen only when it respected clear boundaries. If those boundaries were ignored, I would walk away completely. Dad read every word without speaking. Mom quietly sobbed. Ethan slammed the letter onto the table. So that's it? I looked directly at him. No, this is just the consequence of your choices. He stood up. You're choosing a condo over your family. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I answered without raising my voice. No, I'm choosing myself over people who never treated me like family. Those words hung in the room. Nobody argued. Because deep down, they knew I was right. I stood up and walked toward the door. Just before I left, Dad called my name. I turned around. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I searched his face, trying to decide whether I believed him. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it had come too late. I nodded once and walked away. That was the last family meeting we ever had. Over the next year, my life changed in ways I'd never imagined. I remodeled my condo exactly the way I'd always wanted. I finally took the vacation I'd postponed for years. I accepted a promotion at work without worrying about who might ask me for money next. Most importantly, I learned something I wish I'd understood much earlier. Love without respect isn't love. It's an obligation. Family without boundaries isn't family. It's control. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting to keep people in your life. Sometimes it's having the courage to let them leave. Last Christmas, I celebrated in my condo with a few close friends. There were no arguments, no manipulation, no guilt, just laughter, music, homemade cookies, and peace. As midnight approached, I stood by the window looking at the snow falling outside. I wrapped my hands around a mug of hot chocolate and smiled. A year earlier, I thought losing my family would destroy me. Instead, it gave me something they never could: freedom. And every time I unlocked the front door to the home I fought to protect, I'm reminded that the greatest revenge was never making them suffer. It was refusing to let them take another piece of me ever again.